Welcome to this session of learning Class 9, Chapter 5 that deals with the cells. We are going to examine today one of the most important concepts in biology linked to chemistry, that is the movement of molecules and ions inside the cell, outside the cell, in the cellular environment. We shall study this in little more detail than what is given in our textbook. As a prerequisite, we have to learn a few words and a few meanings of certain things we use in this particular lesson may be useful to you in the next lessons also. You might have learned some of them in the previous lessons. If it is so, it will be a kind of a recapitulation for you. Let us try to know what is the meaning of the word solvent and solute with reference to the living cells. In living cells, water behaves as a solvent. No other liquid, maybe no alcohol, no acids will involve in that. Only water involves in the living cells and in the tissues as a solvent. Solutes refers to the molecules that will dissolve inside that water. Solute particles may be different chemical types, molecular types. We will not discuss that. Maybe examples of salts, maybe sugars, and like that. Many chemicals may be there. When think of solvent and the solute in a cell, inside the cell, that becomes a complex, and that becomes what is known as cytoplasm. Plasma refers to fluid, cyto refers to cell. The fluid present inside the cell, inside the membrane of the cell, is called cytoplasm, and that is the fluid. We refer it by the name word fluid. So there is a fluid inside the cell, which is a solution. And then the outside the cell, that is whatever the liquid or fluid we find outside the cell is separated by means of the cell membrane, or what you call the plasma membrane. So this is the precondition you must understand before we think of learning how ions and molecules move in and out of the cells. I have said 2 points. One, in all the living cells, water becomes the solvent. And then any material that gets dissolved in the water will be the solute. So when once the solute and the solvent go together and they form the solution, whatever we find inside this cell is called cytoplasm. That will be a complex fluid, highly dense in nature many times. Then cell and the cell membrane are always dynamic and they are living, because cell itself is a living being. When once you say cell is a living being, all the contents of the cell, you learn the structure of the cell, they are all living. Especially plasma membrane, it is sometimes called, has a structure of what's called a fluid structure that keeps on changing its shape now and then. It's called fluid mosaic model. You may learn it in your higher classes. Then outside the fluid carry ions and molecules from different parts of the organism. That will be different at different times. If more solutes are there, it becomes highly thick and dense liquid. If there are less number of solute particles, it becomes watery. So we'll look into those conditions in the next few minutes. Outer fluid may be of 3 types normally. One may be hypotonic, isotonic, and hypertonic. What they are, we shall see. So what is that you have to learn in this particular presentation at this point of the time would be, cell is a living entity. Inside the cell, you have the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is nothing but a fluid made by water and the materials present in the cell. Outside the cell is called extracellular fluid, and that fluid carry many materials, and the consistency of that material may vary from time to time. This is what we learned just now. Proceed to learn about the movement of molecules. We shall study a little more detail about the plasma membrane, its structure. Now please look at the diagram given there. You find in this diagram a small part of the plasma membrane is enlarged, and it shows to you in different colors are there. Whatever we see outside, it's called extracellular fluid, and whatever we see inside is called intracellular fluid. So these two you please note. The cell membrane or plasma membrane itself is written in a very good way. Please observe that. You find red small circle-like structures on both sides. They will form two layers. The red type of ball-like structure, circle-like structure, are nothing but carbohydrates. Sometimes they are cellulose, maybe carbohydrate, especially carbohydrate. And the blue ones, what you find, are called the pores made out of proteins. And there are two layers like that. There are two red circles forming the lining, and one is the outer, other is the inner. In between those two, you find a long thread-like parallel-like structure. They form the bilipid layer, and that is also very important. So in all, you say that the plasma membrane is living membrane. It is made up of proteins, it is made up of lipids, and it contains many other types of proteins. And some of these blue type of material, what's shown there, is sometimes called the pores. Pores are not open all the time. Pores are controlled by the dynamic nature of the fluids. Whatever you see outside is called extracellular. There the liquid may be there, the fluid may be of three types. The cell environment itself, both inside and outside, three types you may find: hypotonic, isotonic, and hypertonic. Now let us try to know a little more about these three terms, which I think you should be able to remember. When you say hypotonic, I use the word hypotonic. That means the outside the cell, whatever the fluid is there, that will contain less number of solute particles. That is hypotonic condition. Similarly, if the cytoplasm contains a less number of solutes compared to outside, then cell inside will be hypotonic. So hypotonic refers to the density of the solute particles. If the number of particles are more in number, then it is called hypertonic. If the solute particles are less and if the water particles are more in that molecule cell more, it's called hypo. H-I-Y-P-O. Hypo means low, lower concentration. H-Y-P-R, hyper means higher. So the three conditions are there. One more is called iso, when the density of the water inside and outside the cell is the same. It's called isotonic. So three different conditions may be present in the cell at any given moment of time, and these three conditions will initiate the movement of ions and molecules in and out of the cell. And that is very important point you should know. I will repeat that again. The plasma membrane is sometimes called fluid type because it changes its consistency all the time. outside the cell and inside the cell, you have two different types of fluids. Inside the cell, it's called cytoplasm. Outside, it's called extracellular fluid. And the conditions of the fluids may be hypertonic, hypotonic, or isotonic at different times of the life of a cell. We will try to know more about this in your higher classes. We come to the next point now. I told you about the three types of conditions like hypotonic, isotonic, and hypertonic. Now, how the ions and molecules keep moving? If you look at it, there are 5 different ways in which the ions and molecules may move in or may move out of the cell. I written them. In the yellow, it is called diffusion. In the dark green, it's called osmosis, and the blue one is called plasmolysis. Light green is called facilitated transport. The red one is called active transport. So these are the 5 modes or 5 methods by which the molecules and ions move inside and outside the cell. Please remember, 5 types of movements are possible. One is diffusion, second is osmosis, third is plasmolysis, fourth is facilitated transport, fifth is active transport. These things are very well seen in the plant cells, but in animal cells also we see that, but cognizance is not given that much to the animal cells. So we shall now use the example of plant cells to study this further. Okay, now we have learned there are 5 modes of transport of ions and molecules. We shall try to see one by one. Let's look into this particular diagram I have given their presentation. I have given 2, A and B, 2 different types of diagrams are given in the same picture. A is called diffusion and B is osmosis. Let's see what they are. In diffusion, look at diffusion. In the left side A, in the beaker there is water and we have put some solid into that one. Solute particles are put. Example, maybe sugar is put in there. Now the sugar particles are more condensed compared to water particles. So therefore, sugar molecules will start moving away, and that's called diffusion. They keep moving away from a region of higher density to a region of lower density. What do we mean by that? Sugar has more molecules of sugar at a given volume, and water is not having any sugar. Therefore, sugar molecules move into water molecules in between the space, and that is called diffusion. We will not go to the details of the energy and other things. Maybe you'll learn later on. In the second one is shown osmosis. Look at the difference between that very closely. In B, I have introduced one membrane or a central partition between the two liquids, and that is almost symbolizes the plasma membrane. One inside the what you call the red dots, what you call them cytoplasm, outside maybe exterior fluid. So in the osmosis what happens is the plasma membrane takes part in that. Water molecules only, I will repeat that, water molecules only move from a region of higher water level to a region of lower water level. Other words, when the cells change their conditions like isotonic, hypertonic or hypotonic, water molecules either keep moving inside or keep moving outside. And so now osmosis refers to the movement of water molecules via plasma membrane. Please remember that this happens in especially plants, in the roots, in all the cells it happens. So we shall try to remember Osmosis is a process where molecules of water move via or through plasma membrane. In diffusion, only gas molecules normally move. Example I will give you. If you take plant into consideration, when the daytime is there, water molecules evaporate from the cells and they move on to the water level. That's one type of diffusion where water moves out. And the most important diffusion happens in the daytime in the plant will be carbon dioxide is more outside the plant. In order to get the carbon dioxide into the cells, diffusion takes place. So carbon dioxide molecules move via stomata into the cells, and inside the cells oxygen is released because of photosynthesis, and that oxygen comes out. So diffusion, normally we refer it to the gaseous molecules. Still we can talk about the solvent and solute molecules also. We learned two important types of diffusion there. We will go to the third and the fourth type here. I have given you here the example of one in blue color, other is in yellow color. The blue color indicates what's called facilitated movement, and I have shown the diagram inside. The green color is the protein pore present in the plasma membrane. Sometimes certain molecules will have to move inside from outside the cell, and those molecules may be heavier or their molecules have to be more, and the pore may not be able to allow that, and therefore in such a condition other molecules carry them and transport them into the inside the cell, and such a assisted movement of molecule is known as facilitated movement of molecules. Example for that I can give you is the glucose or amino acids from the tissue moving into the red blood cells is helped by certain other molecules. It's called facilitated movement of molecule. And the fourth one, what we are given in the yellow color, is called the plasmolysis. Now plasmolysis means losing water, and the contents of the cell will shrink in size, and that's called plasmolysis. Lysis means breaking. Plasmolysis means the plasma membrane allows the inner material to shrink. Look at that carefully. There are three diagrams there. One is called turgid, where the water is entering. The cell will now bulge in size. And the second one also, water comes in. By the time the cell becomes completely filled with water, maybe outside the cell there will be glucose and other salt molecules more. The concentration will be more there. It's hypertonic. Therefore, water from the cell moves out. That means cells will lose the water, and then because of that the cytoplasm shrinks in size. So that is plasmolysis. Shrinkage and losing of water is plasmolysis that happens in almost all the cells, especially in the plants. We shall look into the next one after. Okay, I have come to the fifth type of the transport that happens inside the cells, whether it is plant cell or animal cell, and that's called active transport. You can see this diagram here I have shown. In this, a part of the plasma membrane is shown, and those small circles which I talked earlier are shown in the gray color. That is the two layers of the plasma membrane, inside and outside, and the red arrow indicates a pore, and through that pore sometimes what happens is the molecules from inside the cell may have to move to the outside of the cell. In that condition, there is a requirement of enzymes for that, and also ATP, that is energy has to be given. For example, if some cell, for example, produces an enzyme that is required to some other cell, that has to move out. That cannot go by diffusion. It has to be sent by other method. In that condition, enzymes will carry that by spending energy from the adenosine triphosphate molecule, and this is energy required process. That is only one energy required transport in the animal or plant kingdom. Remember that active transport refers to the transport of molecules from inside the cell with the help of enzymes and ATP molecules against the concentration gradient. It may move from higher concentration to other higher concentration with the help of active transport. Remember that. Try to read your book once more to understand this concept. Okay, we discussed the 5 types of molecular and ionic movement in the cells. Now let us have a look at the summary of what we have written now. Ions and molecules move across plasma membrane in living cells and tissues. That's the first point you must remember. Ions and molecules move in and out of living cells. Second point is density of the fluid inside the cell, that is inside the cytoplasm, and outside the cytoplasm exterior fluid will play an important role in the movement of molecules, what's called the passive transport. The 4 types are passive transport, only one type is active where energy is required. The third, we said there are 5 types of movement of cellular movement in cellular environment we could see in the living beings, and they are diffusion, osmosis, plasmolysis, facilitated transport, and active transport. That is very important. Please remember that. Then we said active transport requires energy and enzymes to be transported against the density gradient. That you should remember. That means from higher concentration to other higher concentration it may be moving, and for that it's called active transport. All living cells have the 5 types of molecular and ionic movement inside the cell also. Inside the cell there are organelles, and organelles also require different types of ions and molecules to maintain the life. All this will happen due to ionic movement and the molecular movement from these 5 types. The mechanics of that you can study in the higher classes. Now I am coming to the last part, thanking and also credits to Creative Commons for the pictures I have taken, Karnataka textbooks for the content, Google for certain information, YouTube for publishing this, and you all for looking into this particular PPT. We will meet next time on learning about the nucleus and the cell wall. Thank you all.